Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving deep into a dramatic shift in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, a development that many analysts are calling a turning point in how this war is being fought. Recent reports confirm that Ukrainian forces have successfully targeted and disrupted multiple key land bridges that Russian troops relied on to move supplies, troops, and heavy equipment across the front lines. This is not just another strike on infrastructure. It represents a calculated effort to choke Russian logistics and reshape the operational balance on the battlefield. For months, Russia has depended heavily on ground supply routes to sustain its military operations, particularly in eastern and southern Ukraine. These routes were the backbone of Russian logistics, carrying fuel, ammunition, food, spare parts, and reinforcements to units positioned near the front. Without a steady flow of supplies, even the most heavily armed forces struggle to maintain momentum, and this is exactly the pressure Ukraine is now applying. Ukrainian forces have focused their efforts on weakening these supply lines through precision strikes and coordinated sabotage. Bridges that were once considered secure have been rendered unusable, roads have been cratered, and rail connections have been severed. Each successful strike forces Russian commanders to rethink their plans and scramble for alternatives, often under constant threat of further attacks. The collapse of these land bridges is far more than a temporary inconvenience for Russia. It fundamentally alters how Russian forces can operate in contested regions. When primary routes are destroyed, convoys are forced onto longer, less protected paths that expose them to ambushes and drone strikes. Every additional kilometer traveled increases fuel consumption, delays deliveries, and raises the risk of losing vehicles and personnel. Russian troops on the ground are already facing significant challenges, and disrupted logistics only make the situation worse. Units that once received regular resupply now experience delays and shortages. Fuel scarcity limits vehicle movement, ammunition shortages reduce firepower, and inconsistent food deliveries damage morale. Over time, these problems accumulate and weaken combat effectiveness. Military experts have pointed out that Ukraine's strategy reflects a deep understanding of modern warfare. Control of supply chains can be just as decisive as victories on the battlefield. By targeting infrastructure rather than engaging in costly frontal assaults, Ukraine is forcing Russia to react defensively, slowing advances and preventing the consolidation of territorial gains. Each destroyed bridge or blocked road creates ripple effects throughout the Russian command structure. Operations are delayed, timetables are disrupted, and coordination becomes more difficult. Soldiers who rely on steady supplies begin to lose confidence when those lifelines are repeatedly cut, and that psychological impact can be as damaging as physical losses. One of the most critical areas affected by these disruptions is the southern corridor, where Russian forces have concentrated their efforts to secure access to Black Sea ports. These ports are strategically vital for trade, military logistics, and regional influence. Ukrainian strikes in this region have made it increasingly dangerous for Russian convoys to reach the front lines without suffering losses. Analysts suggest that reduced access to reliable supply routes will significantly lower the efficiency of Russian artillery, armored units, and troop movements. Heavy equipment requires constant maintenance and fuel, and without it, vehicles become liabilities rather than assets. This gives Ukrainian forces a growing operational advantage in both offensive and defensive engagements. The methods used to disrupt Russian supply lines have been varied and carefully planned. Ukrainian forces have employed drones for reconnaissance and strikes, precision artillery to hit key infrastructure, and special operations units to conduct sabotage behind enemy lines. Each operation is designed to maximize disruption while minimizing exposure to Ukrainian personnel. The objective is not simply to destroy equipment, but to create bottlenecks that paralyze movement and slow decision-making. When convoys are delayed or rerouted, The effects spread across multiple units and sectors, amplifying the impact of each strike. This approach shows a high level of coordination and intelligence integration. This campaign also demonstrates Ukraine's evolving military capabilities. Despite being outnumbered in conventional terms, Ukraine has consistently leveraged mobility, real-time intelligence, and strategic targeting to neutralize Russian advantages. The collapse of these land bridges highlights the growing sophistication of Ukraine's logistical and operational planning. On the other side, Russia faces mounting difficulties in adapting to these disruptions. Reports indicate that convoys have become increasingly vulnerable, and the military is forced to divert combat units to protect supply routes and repair damaged infrastructure. These diversions strain already stretched resources and reduce the number of troops available for frontline combat. Repairing bridges and roads under fire is slow and dangerous. Engineering units must work in exposed conditions, often becoming targets themselves. Even when repairs are completed, there is no guarantee the routes will remain operational, as Ukrainian forces continue to monitor and strike at renewed activity. Over time, the cumulative effect of these disruptions could slow Russian offensives to a crawl. As momentum fades, Ukraine gains valuable time to reinforce positions, rotate troops, and plan counteroffensives. This shift in tempo favors the defender and undermines Russia's ability to dictate the pace of the war. The psychological impact on Russian forces cannot be overstated. Soldiers accustomed to regular resupply now face uncertainty and delays. Equipment breakdowns become more frequent without spare parts. Fuel shortages restrict movement, and inconsistent food supplies affect morale. Operating under constant logistical stress takes a toll on any military. Knowing that supply lines are under continuous threat forces units to operate with extreme caution. Convoys move more slowly, routes are changed frequently, and coordination becomes more complex. This constant state of vulnerability erodes confidence and reduces operational effectiveness across the board. From a broader strategic perspective, the collapse of these land bridges has implications beyond the immediate battlefield. International observers are closely watching how Russia adapts its logistics, and whether these disruptions influence the overall trajectory of the conflict. Successful interdiction of supply routes could redefine how future wars are fought. The economic dimension of these disruptions is also significant. Transporting supplies over longer, less secure routes increases fuel consumption and maintenance costs. Vehicles are more likely to be damaged or destroyed, leading to material losses that are expensive to replace. For Russia, already under economic pressure, inefficient logistics add another layer of strain. Ukraine, meanwhile, benefits from comparatively shorter and more protected supply lines. This logistical advantage allows for faster resupply, rapid redeployment of forces, and greater flexibility in responding to battlefield developments. Maintaining one's own supply chain while disrupting the enemy's is a powerful force multiplier. International reactions to these developments have been notable. Military analysts and commentators have highlighted Ukraine's growing proficiency in asymmetric warfare. The ability to achieve strategic effects through targeted strikes demonstrates that numerical superiority is not the sole determinant of success. Western military advisors have praised Ukraine's integration of intelligence, technology, and tactical execution. By combining satellite imagery, drone surveillance, and precision weapons, Ukrainian forces have been able to systematically weaken Russian operational capabilities without engaging in prolonged attritional battles. The consequences of these disruptions are already visible. Reports suggest that some Russian units have been forced to abandon positions due to shortages of fuel and ammunition. Armored vehicles left idle become easy targets, and troops waiting for supplies are exposed to both enemy attacks and harsh conditions. Ukrainian forces are well positioned to exploit these vulnerabilities. When defenses weaken due to logistical strain, Opportunities arise for targeted offensives and counterattacks. Striking where the enemy is weakest maximizes effectiveness and conserves resources. Beyond physical damage, Ukraine's campaign against supply lines carries symbolic weight. It sends a clear message that Russian forces, despite their size and firepower, are not invulnerable. Even critical infrastructure can be targeted with precision, challenging assumptions about control and security. Satellite imagery has provided compelling evidence of widespread damage to key transit routes. Destroyed bridges, cratered roads, and severed rail lines have transformed the landscape, severely limiting Russian mobility. Restoring these routes under constant threat is both time-consuming and resource-intensive. In response, Russia has attempted to reroute supply chains and accelerate repairs. However, these measures are often temporary. Ukrainian forces continue to monitor movement and strike at renewed activity, creating a cycle of repair and disruption that favors Ukraine. The strategic advantage lies with the side that can sustain pressure while maintaining its own operations. So far, Ukraine appears to be doing exactly that. By consistently targeting logistics, Ukraine keeps Russian forces on the defensive and limits their ability to regroup. The implications for future operations are profound. Without reliable supply lines, large-scale offensives become difficult to sustain. Russian forces may be forced into more defensive postures in certain regions, effectively ceding the initiative to Ukraine. This shift opens opportunities for Ukrainian counteroffensives, particularly in areas where Russian units are isolated or weakened. Each successful interdiction increases pressure on Russian command structures and may influence decisions at higher strategic levels. Beyond the battlefield, these developments also affect diplomatic and political calculations. A visible inability to maintain secure logistics can be perceived internationally as a sign of weakness, influencing negotiations and alliances. At the same time, Ukraine's effectiveness strengthens its position on the global stage. The collapse of these land bridges underscores the importance of adaptability in modern warfare. Reliance on static supply routes leaves forces vulnerable to a mobile and responsive opponent. The ability to exploit vulnerabilities in real time is a decisive advantage. Military lessons from this campaign extend far beyond Ukraine. Control of roads, bridges, and transport hubs is now recognized as a critical factor in operational success. Logistics and flexibility are just as important as firepower and troop numbers. As the conflict continues, observers expect Ukraine to refine its targeting strategy even further. Choke points, transport hubs, and remaining bridges are likely to remain high-priority targets. The goal is sustained pressure rather than one-time disruption. This approach is not without risks. Ukraine must maintain accurate intelligence, avoid overextension,